Over the past year, I've been building a Sons of Horus army, and it's finally at a point where I feel like I can show it to you guys. I'm really proud of it, I think it's really cool, and in this video, I'm going to show you all the progress I've made so far. I'm also going to tell you about why I think they're so cool, and why 10,000 years later, their legacy still makes the galaxy tremble. You're watching Eric's Hobby Workshop, and this is my Sons of Horus army. So last summer, the new edition of Horus Heresy came out, and Games Workshop was cool enough to send me the new box set. I decided to make one Marine from each Legion to help me choose my army. Now believe it or not, I actually used up a lot of the Mark 6 Marines in that box while doing that, so I wanted to do something different for this army. And we'll get into that. But before we do, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
Brother, have you heard of Raid Shadow Legends? What? Of course not. Right, well, check this out. It's an RPG combat simulator from before Old Night. Oh, really? Yeah, it totally rocks. I've been playing the challenging Doom Tower, where the Arbiter has locked all the enemies too tough to defeat. Searoth is leaking back into the world, and the Arbiter can't contain them anymore. A lot of the enemies ignore block debuffs, so you need some seriously powerful champions to prevail. I don't understand what a lot of that means. That's okay, I'm mostly talking at you for expository purposes. Oh, okay, carry on. This spring, Raid is going on an egg hunt. Just download Raid Shadow Legends using the links below, copy your in-game player ID, and then head on over to egghunt.polarium.com before May 15th. If you find the hidden egg, you'll be in for a chance to win amazing in-game items, and even real-life prizes from Raid Champions to Amazon gift cards. Word. Use my link or scan the QR code right here, and get a free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. The link is in the description box below.
So before starting this army, I'd never played Horus Heresy before, and I had no idea where to start. A lot of people said, oh, it's really simple, it's just the same as 7th edition 40k, which means absolutely nothing to me, because I wasn't a 40k player back in 7th edition. So I had a little look at the rulebook, and I'm not gonna lie guys, reading the rulebook for a game that I've never played is a lot like reading software terms and conditions for me. My eyes glaze over, and I absorb very little, and it's extremely difficult for me to learn a game system that way. And I think this is probably a catch-22 that a lot of people go through when they're starting a new game. You don't know the rules because you haven't played because you don't have an army, and you haven't built an army because you don't know the rules yet. So when in doubt, I just start making minis. I knew that for a Space Marine army, there's a pretty good chance that I'd need a whole bunch of Space Marines. So let's just start there. Any and every army needs a core of troops. So I started by making a unit of 10 despoilers using Games Workshop's Mark IV armor kit as a starting point. Despoilers are basic Space Marines, but equipped for close combat, typically with a bolt pistol and a chainsword. Now there's no official plastic kit for despoilers, and I wanted them to be unique to my army and also in dynamic running poses, similar to the way the assault intercessors are for Warhammer 40k. So I swapped out their bodies for some running poses from Tortuga Bay miniatures. The heads I swapped out for some 3D printed heads that are somewhat inspired by the Mark IV heads, but have a few extra chaos details like spikes and studs. Since making these models, Games Workshop has released an upgrade sprue to make despoilers, but because that didn't exist at the time, I had to raid my bits box, using bits from Chaos Space Marines, Assault Intercessors, and Death Company to equip them all with chainswords, power axes, and bolt pistols. Since I had no idea what I was doing, I relied on this useful blog that I found called Warpstone Flux, and that's where I got the loadout from. So that's how I ended up with 10 Marines, with 1 Vexilla, 1 Power Fist on the Sergeant, and 2 axes. I used an old tactical squad flag for the Vexilla, using a bit of brass rod to extend the banner pole. I'm really happy with how that ended up looking. Yeah, I know, there's still an Imperial Eagle on there and these are traitors. I'll swap that out at some point, but for now, I'm just gonna say that he's rocking that ironically. I was so happy with this squad that I made a second squad. This time just regular tactical Marines, but in much the same style, using Tortuga bodies, but with the arms, shoulders, backpacks, and weapons coming from the official Mark IV kit. To round out my troops, I made a third unit using an old unit of metal scouts that I had lying around. These models are classics, and I think they painted up really nicely in this Sons of Horus scheme. I don't think they're going to be very effective on the table, but I'm not actually super concerned about that. I didn't actually feel like painting up 10 more Marines at this stage, so I went with a small unit of scouts. Sometimes you gotta do stuff like this. My favorite units in all of Warhammer 30k and 40k are dreadnoughts, so I knew I had to have a couple dreadnoughts in this army. This Contemptor here was converted by my friend Saul Vince over on Instagram, and I'm really thrilled to have it in my army. He used bits from a ton of Forge World kits and added all these gruesome trophies, and I think it looks really great. Contemptors are also so much fun to paint. Because they're a bit larger than regular Marines, they're easier to paint in a volumetric style that accentuates the light hitting the big blocky shapes that they're made up of. I started by painting my base coat over black primer, then with the airbrush I started adding highlights from above. Once you've done that, you just add blacks, metals, and pick out some details, and it's already starting to look really decent. It's really satisfying. This is one of 2 Contemptors that I have in my army so far. I'm told that they're really good in this edition, but maybe too good. Apparently it's a rule of thumb that you shouldn't take more than 1 Contemptor per 1,000 points because they're so good that it's unsportsmanlike. So I'll have to wait to make that 3rd one. Another unit type that I really love is Terminators. So I added this unit here, which I call my Tartofracti Terminators, aka Mark, I had no idea what I was doing when I made them armor. Because basically they're true scale Tartaros bodies I had left over from my Black Templars project, mixed with Cataphracti arms and weapons. It turned out as a happy little accident because I think the poses and silhouettes of the model are actually really nice. They're unique to my army, and I'm really happy with them. To round out my elites, I wanted some even more elite elites. I'm getting worse at writing scripts. So far, all of the models I've shown have the iconic sea green armor of the Sons of Horus, but First Company, the most elite division of the Sons of Horus, actually wore black armor. This is a great excuse to change up the paint scheme a little bit and add some variation, and it's here that I've busted out some new Forge World Sons of Horus heads. They just look so badass. Each one of these guys looks like the Black Panther or something. It's absolutely awesome. I gave them these huge double turbine jump packs from Max Mini to make them into Reaver Aggressors, but to be honest, I might switch those out in the future. I'm not super happy with those. I gave this guy some flaps of skin on his shoulder pads though. I think that looks pretty sweet. To support my army in the heavy support slot, I took a whole bunch of tanks. Now, I'm not going to go too into depth into these tanks in this video because I made a whole video on how I paint tanks, and I'll link that here. But I will say, if there's one thing Horus Heresy has a lot of, it's cool new tank designs. My favorite is probably this one here, the Sakaran Venator Tank Hunter, aka the Compensator. It's got this huge laser that's awesome for hunting other tanks on the battlefield. It has this really cool rule that even if it doesn't damage the other tank, the shock of the laser still immobilizes them for a turn. So that's pretty sweet. To lead my army, I originally converted one of the Praetors from the Age of Darkness box. Those Praetors are really great minis, but I did a simple weapon and head swap so that it wouldn't look the same as everyone else's who got that box. I thought this guy was looking pretty sweet, but then I started reading the Siege of Terra books, and I realized that what I really needed was the greatest villain this galaxy has ever known. I'm talking, of course, about... no, not Horus. Abaddon. Abaddon. Yes, that's right, Abaddon the Despoiler. 10,000 years before he was the scourge of the 40k universe, he was the first captain of the Sons of Horus. I remember being 10 years old and my friend showing me the old metal Abaddon model that he had. I remember thinking, wow, what's up with his hair? Which is a fair question. Over the years, that top knot style has actually really grown on me, and if I had long enough hair, I'd probably do a little top knot of my own.
Why would you want to do that?
It's a joke, honey.
Like, actually, why?
It's not a joke. Anyways, I decided to convert myself a true scale Abaddon that reflects him before the influence of chaos. A formidable warrior, but still a mortal man mostly unmessed with by the forces of the warp. I gave him the iconic claw and power sword, but I also gave him the old tactical rock, classic addition to any model to give them some extra stature on the table. Nice. Now, as the leader of First Company, he needed some of his elite bodyguard as well, the Justaran Terminators. Again, as members of First Company, these guys wear black. And as you may know, after the defeat of Horus, Abaddon went on to found the Black Legion. I think it's cool that these guys' armor kind of foreshadows that with the black and gold trim. Finally, I gave these guys a Land Raider to roll into battle with. The Land Raider Proteus is something that you see recurring over and over again in Horus Heresy. It's quite an old design from the 90s that they've spruced up and made new again, and then sort of retconned it in as old technology, which I think is really fun. I added some transfers to this Land Raider from the Forge World transfer sheet and ended up with something that I think is really awesome looking. And that's my army so far. I've been able to get them out on the table, and I think that they look incredible. I'm really proud of them. A lot of individual effort has gone into this army. It's been a labor of love in between other projects over the last couple months. I've had 2 battles so far, and I'm 1-1, which is not the worst thing in the world, so it seems like my inexperience before building the army hasn't bit me too badly. This army is something I hope to keep building in the future, and I'm sure it's not the last time you'll see it on this channel. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss anything. A massive thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. If you want to join, I'll put a link in the description. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time on Eric's Hobby Workshop.